Let's talk about how I got rid of my debilitating back pain postpartum. So, my history with back pain is a very long one. So, I developed back pain probably before I was a teenager. And I never thought it was a problem because all of the adults around me that I knew always said back pain is normal because they all had it. It just seemed like it's something that happens as you age. It's something that's just something to be standardized and normalized. And I never questioned getting back pain. In fact, when I got back pain as like a young teen, I thought it was normal and like part of growing up. Like, well, the adults in my life all have back pain. So, like, I'm just maturing and becoming more of an adult because now I have all this pain in my back. I know it sounds wild in retrospect, but that was truly like I never questioned having back pain until my early 20s because I thought it's just the no pain, no gain messaging to me was so strong, like it was coming from all directions, right? So in my family, they all had back pain. And then if I looked at like magazines and movies, etc., like if people trained hard, they were in pain. And so I like to train hard. I was doing sports, I was lifting weights, and I was like, okay, this is normal. Like it's part of the process to be in pain. I didn't understand the difference of like good pain and bad pain. Well, so the good pain being like my muscles are sore from training hard, and they go away. But like my back pain, actually, it was like I had sciatica, which was nerve pain going down my legs. So I got like numbness in my feet, and I had like my SI joints were very hypermobile. So I would throw my back out very regularly. Like we're talking like every month, probably likely synced to my period. I would throw out my back when I would lift something, but it was like it would never tie to like lifting heavy weights. It would just be like I bend down to pick up something off the floor and my back would go out. And then I would like hobble along, not tell anybody because this is part of the process. No pain, no gain. This is normal. And I would just like hobble along for a while and then like hide it. So I have a lot of back pain history. And I didn't start to figure out my back pain until my 20s, and ultimately led me down this path of learning body mechanics and getting my degree in kinesiology and kind of dedicating my whole life to figuring out how to not be in pain and still train hard. Um, so I knew that pregnancy was going to be an important event for my back pain. Like I knew it was going to impact it somehow. So the most interesting part is when I got pregnant, my back pain, like I still had nagging back pain here and there, even though I've been doing everything, stabilizing my SI joints and working on my back pain and doing my mobility drills, like I was doing everything I possibly could to get out of to not have back pain, all through my 30s and before getting pregnant. When I got pregnant, all of those nagging aches and pains in my back went away. It was like magic. And kind of in retrospect, I know why, because my SI joints sort of stabilized given that there was a baby now there growing and kind of filling in that gap and providing support for my lower back. And it was taking, the muscles that I was still trying to train and activate to stabilize my back. That growing baby took over. Thank you, Violet. Like I had, a few good months of no back pain, as opposed to my usual waking up stiff and sore with back pain, especially after hard training, like training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or lifting heavy weights. I would wake up stiff and sore in my back. And I had to do a long warm up to get going and all of that. And I sort of like that was just part of my day. But then I got pregnant and I was waking up like, okay, I'm like joint wise, at least like I was tired, I was everything, but joint wise, I was feeling pretty good, like pretty good. My back was pretty good. It's kind of magical. Now I also knew this wouldn't last, and I knew that there was a catch, right? Of course, like my whole life since early teenage years, I'm in pain, and all of a sudden, like this is all fixed by being pregnant. Okay, well I'm not going to be pregnant forever, so okay, I knew it wasn't going to last. So when I gave birth, I had overall a great experience in terms of not having a traumatic birth. I had an unmedicated birth. I was very specific about that because I didn't want, for many reasons, I didn't want any pain relief. I wanted to experience the birth, but also I did not want a needle going into my spine, knowing that I have all of the back issues that I have. So it was important to me to not receive any epidurals, obviously wanted to avoid having a C-section, again, due to my back issues and for many reasons, like I didn't want major surgery. So I did everything I could to have an unmedicated natural birth. And ultimately, it worked out that way. And very grateful for that. Of course, there are points along the way that were not straightforward. Like I had to have my water broken. There were points in there that I needed medical assistance, and but we got through it. And ultimately, my birth did not have trauma. And I didn't have any tearing, and it was unmedicated. So when I gave birth, I actually felt great because I had no medical interventions. So afterward, I felt like I got run over by a truck, like I ran a marathon through sand, but I didn't feel like, I didn't have anything super major going on that kind of sidelined me. So overall, I felt great. And I was waiting for that back pain to appear. I was waiting, like, I kind of was like sitting there waiting. When is this coming? When is this coming? Well, the interesting thing that the back pain didn't come for a few months. It came in a different form. The back pain manifested itself as pelvic floor issues. So within a few days of giving birth, I had extremely painful. My SI joint was actually fine, but my pubic symphysis, which is the front sort of the pelvis, was extremely, extremely painful. And I could not do any split leg motions. I had a hard time getting up off the floor. Like lunges were out of the question. Getting in and out of the car was difficult. So that pain manifested itself. That was like the pain shifted. And then my pelvic floor felt extremely heavy. Like heaviness in the pelvic floor is something that I wouldn't wish upon anyone, because every step you feel it and you kind of feel like your organs are going to fall out. And it's not a great feeling. And it just feels like, okay, I'm never going to be able to run and jump. That's not even a possibility. I mean, walking, every single step, I feel heaviness in the pelvic floor, and it's debilitating and very upsetting because I've never felt that before, and I never expected, to have this issue, right? So it's kind of like a new sensation that I can do nothing about. That's obviously the most frustrating, because when you know pain is there for a reason, like during delivery and childbirth, like I can deal with that. If I have pain and I know how to fix it, like my old back pain, I can deal with that. Like I've had this before, I know what to do. When I had the pelvic floor issues, like again, pubic symphysis pain, where it was like this shearing force, it was like this extreme pain in the front of my pelvis, literally doing anything, and then walking, and this heavy, heavy feeling like all of my organs are just sitting on my pelvic floor about to fall out. Like that was new, and it didn't feel like it's ever going to go away. And it didn't go away for a very long time. It didn't go away for truly completely gone away for 9 months. So I had some form of that for 9 months after giving birth to my baby. So that was the kind of like the shift in back pain for me. And in retrospect, I have figured it out. I no longer have this pain, so I want to share with you how I did it. But in retrospect, here's the punchline. My pelvis, again, I always had hypermobile SI joints, so they always had a lot of mobility. During the delivery, the SI joint, so the sacrum, moves out of the way if you let it. I mean, again, given that I had an unmedicated birth, I was moving around, and I actually gave birth on my side. For those of you who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I gave birth in a knee shield position. So I was like on my side with my knee up. And my sacrum was able to move out of the way for the baby's head to make her way through. Now, where did that sacrum go afterward? Well, it sort of didn't, right? So that area that I felt it pop, I heard it crack. Like I remember, in between contractions, like she moved into my birth canal into that area, and she, like, I heard the pop, I felt the crackle. It was, and I remember, like, I screamed, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Of course, I was like really, really close, and I got a lot of encouragement from my husband and everybody who was there. But it was like, oh my God, this is exactly how you think it's going to feel. It feels exactly like that. But anyway, my sacrum didn't go back into place. It sort of like it moved out of the way, and then that whole side, that whole area was numb for 3 months, 4 months. I couldn't feel it. Like, if I touched it, I couldn't feel it because it was moved out of the way. And so the muscles surrounding that area, which is the pelvic floor, I mean, the pelvic floor is connected to connects the lower half of your pelvis, right? So the pelvic floor was trying to hold on. And so the pubic symphysis was also affected because it's the front part of the pelvis. And so it was just like, there was like all these shearing forces, given that, sacrum moved out of the way, the hips kind of, the pelvic halves widened apart. And so how are they going to go back together? Well, the pelvic floor is trying to do that job of bringing them closer together. It was trying to kind of hold on. And it was literally like, oh, that's how it felt. Now, in retrospect, I know that. Of course, during feeling that, it wasn't that funny. It wasn't funny at all. But the pelvic floor was kind of overstretched and holding on to the pelvic halves that have moved out of the way. It was trying to support my whole body and like keep it stable and structured. And so the pelvic floor was taking over because, of course, okay, so the abs, the belly, are overstretched. They're not ready to fire yet. So that it took me, like, I remember at least 3 months to just feel somewhat normal in my abs and like able to feel and contract them. And so the pelvic floor is like, okay, I'll take over, right? Because somebody needs to do this job. Otherwise, we fall apart. So, pelvic floor took over, abs weren't ready. And the back was just like numb. It couldn't function to do its job to stabilize the sacrum and the lower back and so on. And so again, that pain manifested in an interesting way, I think. And so I bet many people have this issue. It just hasn't been outlined like this anywhere that I've seen it. But anyone who goes through childbirth will have an SI joint widening, and then will have some pelvic shearing, and will have some pelvic floor involvement. Yeah, you're going to have pelvic floor involvement when you deliver a baby vaginally. So I think I don't need to convince you of that. So anyway, that's how my back pain manifested. Now, I started to try to go back to exercise, but obviously my body didn't feel the same. I couldn't activate the muscles in the same way. So it was a completely different. So I had to relearn how to do things. But I kept going and going in circles because the usual stuff I did that made me feel better affected my pelvic floor negatively. So at any time I would pick up a kettlebell, I would do kettlebell deadlifts, swings, squats, anything that I expected to help me hurt me. And it was because I was using my old way of moving, my old neuromuscular recruitment patterns to do this. But now I had a new sort of body. I had to learn this new body with the overly tightened pelvic floor, trying to hold on to my pelvic halves, my abs not being able to fire, and my back being kind of numb and out of commission. So I had to relearn, and these are the main takeaways that I had. I had a tendency, as it turns out, before pregnancy, when I would, at the top of the deadlift, at the top of the swing, I would clench my butt because I was taught to do that to kind of like straighten up my hips. I was over clenching my butt. And when you clench your butt, what happens to your pelvic floor? Your pelvic floor tightens. They're so closely related, right? Your glutes and your pelvic floor are very tightly coupled. Okay, so when you over engage your glutes, you're likely going to over tighten, over engage your pelvic floor. Well, my pelvic floor was already over tightened, so it had no room for that shit. It had no room for my glutes to also put that pressure on it. And so every time I would over clench my butt on those exercises, and again, squats, deadlifts, swings, whatever, it wasn't having it. Like it gave me more and more pelvic floor heaviness symptoms, and it again giving me that feeling like my organs are falling out. Um, because it was like, I literally can't support this. Like you're trying to work out, I'm trying to just stabilize your back. Okay, so this is me talking to my pelvic floor, my pelvic floor being angry at me when I overdo it, right? But then I had to relearn. Okay, if I don't clench my butt, how do I straighten up? Like, where does that muscle activation come from? Because I've learned it this way for many, many years. I've been told to squeeze my butt in every single fitness class I've ever taken, and in my ballet classes. It's like, that at the top of the deadlift, like push your hips forward. I had to stop doing that. I had to unlearn that. So I stopped putting pressure on my pelvic floor. And it was not serving me. It wasn't like an important movement to do. It was just something that was like part of my movement history, my way of doing things. And the other thing that I had to unlearn and redo is gripping my abs. Because as soon as I felt a little bit of my abs, again, about 3 months after delivery, I felt my abs somewhat fire. I started to use them more and more because I'm like, okay, it's time to turn my abs on. And I was used to gripping my abs from ballet, from training weights. You kind of want your ab wall tight. And I always walked around like I'm about to get punched in the gut, which is something I picked up from MMA. I'm like, well, this is a great way to tighten your abs, right? Like, so that sensation of like you're about to get punched in the stomach is a great way to brace your core. So I thought. And so I turned my abs on that way and like gripped them for bracing, thinking I'm doing myself a favor because that will ultimately help stabilize my back. Well, what it ended up doing was it prevented me from breathing properly, and I needed to relearn my breath mechanics because after pregnancy and birth, your breath mechanics change because the belly grew out, the rib position changed. And so the diaphragm no longer moved in the same pattern. And so most people going through this, most women going through this, have to relearn how to breathe again after giving birth, after being pregnant and giving birth. And it's regardless of the delivery method, the ability to let the stomach go and then expand it for the inhale, and then feel your pelvic floor relax and expand on the inhale. And then on the exhale, being able to contract your deep abdominal muscles and your pelvic floor to then contract the area to pressurize. And that would be the exhale, so the diaphragm moves up. This is something that I hated doing because I think breath work is super boring, to be honest. But I had to do it because there was no other option for me, because otherwise all of that tension was going down to my pelvic floor. So gripping my abs was causing more pressure on the pelvic floor, and I had to relearn how to work again, how to breathe again. So it wasn't even like, oh, you have to relearn how to deadlift again. It was like, okay, let's start with relearning how to breathe again. So about 5-6 months in of that struggle of like, okay, literally don't understand. I'm a healthy person who has always worked out, and now I'm unable to lift any weight without this extreme pressure and pain. What is going on? So it's just like kind of like no light in the end of the tunnel. It was a very depressing time. And started with relearning how to breathe. And then I got a suggestion, or I finally came to putting in an SI belt. I've been told to try an SI belt forever because I've always had an SI issue. Like before pregnancy, I was told, why don't you just try a sacroiliac joint belt? And it's something that like binds your hips together. It's not for your upper, like it's not for your waist. It's not a waist trainer. It goes around your hips, around the bone parts of your hips, and it's kind of like a pleasant tightness to give you a little bit of support. And I resisted that because I'm like, I have my own muscles. My own muscles can do it. Leave me alone. I'm not wearing these devices. And maybe I was right back then, but when I put it on, I immediately felt pressure release on my pelvic floor. Like my pelvic floor was like just no issues. Like immediately pain and pressure went away as soon as I put on this belt. Okay, so connecting the dots, the SI joints were apart. They were like kind of loose and moving apart, and the SI joint belt helped them stabilize, put them together. And so the muscles around that area, so my pelvic floor, was able to let go and was able to then be retrained, be kind of start figuring out how to rehabilitate after birth. And that's 5 months later. That is 5 months later. So, the postpartum recovery is not 6 weeks. Maybe some people don't have SI joint issues and are able to like not deal with it. I wish that for them, but it's no one recovers after 6 weeks. There's just way too many things affected for us to recover after 6 weeks. So anyway, 5 months in, I wear this SI belt, and like all of a sudden I can feel my muscles activate properly. And all of a sudden I feel like a pressure release on my pelvic floor. So then I'm able to exercise. And so I'm able to incorporate, okay, no more gripping abs, no more clenching butts. And I wear this SI belt, and I'm actually able to do exercises, and I'm actually able to do some of the movement patterns I used to do before. 5, 6, 7 months, I do that, and it's sort of working, but I know that I have this crutch of this SI belt. Now, what the SI belt did though, was it helped me ultimately bring my joints back together into a somewhat normal position. And I could literally tell because my pant size was changing, right? So expanded pregnancy and then post-delivery, and then SI belt sort of helped my hips to come back together, and I was back to my size, my jean size. However, what SI belt didn't do and could never do was reactivate my lower back. So my lower back was numb at first. Then it got some help from this SI belt. We released some pressure from the surrounding muscles of abs and pelvic floor. They're all connected. That's your core. But now we needed to retrain my back to stabilize. So here's what happened. I took off the SI belt. I went into the water to swim, which I was doing some swimming because that was the only thing that relieved pressure from my pelvic floor. So loved swimming around that time. And then I got out of the water and I felt my back kind of, I felt that familiar ache. And that day, and I was carrying my baby around and just like, okay, this is starting to feel familiar, like the back pain of before I had a baby, that familiar back pain of my youth started to come back, and I knew it's coming, and I kind of wanted to write it off. And like this was like 7 months after I gave birth, right? So I had a good run of having no back pain, and then it came, and then it became worse and worse. And I'm talking like the next day, my back was out, and it was, I couldn't straighten up. So you're sitting to straighten up was like, okay, I'm going to need like 3-5 minutes of just like, walking bent over. And so it just started, and then it started to travel up to my mid back. And it was just like it made me completely incapacitated. That back pain started to travel and kind of took over my whole back, and it was just like incomplete spasm, and I could not pick up my baby. Like that wasn't even a question. There was no way I could pick up my baby, but I couldn't change her diaper. I couldn't give her a bath. Like I couldn't carry her. I couldn't pick up her diaper bag. Like I could sit there and breastfeed. And then I needed somebody to take her so that I can like get up slowly and walk over. Like walking, I couldn't, like, it was just, I was useless. I was incapacitated from not just like enjoying life. I could not function with that back pain. Like that pain that was the worst pain. That was the worst back pain I've ever had, hands down. And I would say it was worse than labor pain, because labor pain for me lasted 24, 28 hours. Like it was a span of a 2-day period. Like, and I knew why it's happening, and I could mentally deal with it because I knew why I'm in pain and why we're doing this. I had my why and it was fine. And then I had this back pain, and we're like a few days in, I'm like, okay, it's not getting better. Usually it gets better. It was not getting better. A week goes by, and then I start freaking out because I'm like, I'm debilitated, and I'm grateful because I had help, that, people around me were helping me so much with my baby to just, again, function. It wasn't about me. It was the fact that I couldn't hold my baby made it so much more painful, because before it was just me having back pain. It was my problem, but this affected my child and my ability to care for her. So that was way worse. And then the fact that I had no idea how to get out of it, because it was nothing that I've tried was working. No, none of my usual things were helping. And I was in complete disarray. Like I didn't know what to do. And it was extremely painful, like tenfold from what I've ever experienced before. So what needed to happen, and my physical therapist, knew, finally came up with this idea, bless him, to do some neuromuscular reeducation on my lower back. And we did this unique exercise that I've all through my years of like practicing kinesiology and looking at people's biomechanics and all that, I've never seen that exercise before. And it had to do with just turning on the deep stabilizer muscles of the lower back. Like I've done that a ton of times, but it was just like a unique way of doing it. And we were able to reestablish that connection. So it comes down to neuromuscular reeducation of those muscles in the deep lower back to stabilize that area, which then allowed all of the rest of the muscles to let go. So it's usually like back pain is, it's about it creates tension because your low back is unstable. And so the muscles around it start to overcompensate and tighten up. And that's where that pain often comes from. And so in this case, even a massage would not release that pain because there was no stability around my lower back and my SI joint. And until I was able to reintegrate those muscles to work and stabilize my spine, the rest of the muscles wouldn't let go. So no acupuncture, no amount of massage were able to fix it until I was able to re-educate the muscles to stabilize my spine. So neuromuscular re-education, that had to happen. And as soon as I started doing it, and I do it every single day, and I will do it every single day because I never ever want that pain to come back. And it won't, of course, because I've put in the work now. But as soon as I started doing it, and it was like around 9 months postpartum, I felt fine. I felt normal. I felt like everything finally settled down, because now all of the pieces were finally firing together. So my pelvic floor released because my SI joints were stabilized. I was able to let go of my abs because they were and they were able to breathe instead of put pressure down on my pelvic floor. So it was just like this whole interconnected web of pain that I had to figure out. And this is all about connecting those dots. This is all about connecting those dots, because going to different practitioners, they would give me some relief, some help in some area of this puzzle. But the general puzzle is this: postpartum, back is unstable, muscles are not firing. There needs to be re-education of how to breathe, how to let go, how to not put extra pressure where you don't need it, how to not tense, and where to tense instead, which was my lower back. I needed to re-educate my deep stabilizer muscles of the lower back, how to fire, so that I can then go back to my regular fitness activities. And I started to lift weights again. I was able to incorporate those stabilizer muscles into my movement patterns. I was able to then start doing my deadlift, squat, swings using the stabilization of my lower back, feeling that, being aware of it, activating it, and then using it. So literally updating the way I move so that I'm not putting pressure on my pelvic floor. I'm not over gripping my abs or butt, and I am stabilizing in my lower back. And then I was able to rebuild. That was the path. Then I was able to do the exercises. So, like, if somebody was giving me scaled workouts 6 weeks postpartum, I could not do them. There was nothing I could do because my muscle activation wasn't there to stabilize my lower back. So there was no amount of scaling I could do. But once I was able to do the neuromuscular re-education, took time. But once I was able to become aware of it and integrate it into my movement patterns, then I could rebuild. So then I can do the scaled exercises and then scale them up, then do more weights and so on. Now, at 10 months postpartum, I actually pretty much recovered all of my strength. So that rebuild phase took a fairly short time. What took a long time was figuring out that I need to stabilize my lower back muscles, which were ultimately the crux of this whole puzzle. And that's now becoming my life's mission, to teach women postpartum how to restabilize your back, how to identify what you need to activate, which muscles you need to activate, where do you need to release tension, and where do you need to add tension, so that you can reconnect with your body. Because I struggled for so long, I think longer than most people, given that, again, I mean, until 9 months postpartum, I did not, I could not go back to any of my previous activities, and went through tremendous amounts of pain. So could that have been prevented? I think so. I really think so. Had I had a different approach to my lower back restabilization using neuromuscular education. It's a mouthful, but well worth it for anybody struggling with low back pain, because your lower back, your whole back, has muscles that stabilize itself. Like your back has the musculature to support itself. And so we just sort of ignore it and start to like squeeze your butt, squeeze your abs, like tighten your abs to stabilize your back. But it's like, well, your back also can stabilize your back. So anyway, this is my story of how I ended up fixing my debilitating back pain postpartum. It took a while, but now I have connected the dots and have a path forward. I think having the path forward, so no matter what obstacle comes my way, I now know that I can rebuild myself. I don't question that anymore. If I have any twinge of back pain, I know what to do. I know how to recover from it. And that is just, that is everything to me, because now I can work out, but I can also take care of my baby. I can also do what I need to do to make sure I'm there for her.